Look, before we begin today, I do want to just begin by acknowledging the family members of the dairy worker at Sandringham who was horrifically killed overnight. Sandringham is my local community, and I know that the local community is a tight-knit one, and that particular dairy was well supported by the local community, including through a group who had established themselves some time ago to ensure that they were responding to issues and community prevention concerns. It is devastating to see what has happened, and I've expressed publicly and do so again today. I am so sorry for this family for what has happened. Of course, our job as government is to make sure we do everything we can to prevent these kinds of events from occurring, but also making sure that we support the police so that offenders are brought to justice. Right now, as you can imagine, and rightly so, the focus of the police is on apprehending who is responsible for this horrific act. The police, I understand, held a press conference earlier today giving extra detail and calling for the public's assistance in identifying the individual and bringing them to justice. I will continue to receive briefings, both as a local Member of Parliament, but also because of the focus that we have as a government presently on what we have seen a particular targeting of retailers, dairies and superettes. It has primarily been in recent times ram raids. We've seen a decline this month, but you can see from this event we still have grave concerns over repeated aggravated robberies, burglaries, and this is a scenario where we've seen the most horrific of outcomes. We have, of course, put in place the preventative funding that sits alongside fault cannons to try and make sure that that extra support is in place. But we are continually talking as ministers about what more can be done to support in particular the police and business owners. I'll refer a little bit just to why we're here today. Obviously, we had a visit here booked in with Georgie Danzy to spend a little bit of time looking at some of the growth that we have had in Hamilton. It has changed dramatically over the last decade. We've got a large number of families moving into Hamilton because it's a great place to bring up your kids. It's one of the reasons why Georgie has lived here for several decades. Of course, that brings pressure on housing and public housing. Today we visited a transitional housing place. You can see some of the work we're doing to provide housing, particularly for 17 to 24-year-olds. We're proud of the 600 public houses we've built here, more than 300 transitional, but there's more to be done. And just a quick check-in on the regional theatre.
The Dairy and Business Association says if the government listened to their concerns, this death could have been avoided. What is your reaction to that?
Look, I think the most important thing today is to make sure that, first and foremost, we acknowledge the family at the centre of this horrific event. And also that we make sure that the police are as well supported as they can be to make sure that justice is done and that the person who is responsible for this act is brought to justice. Of course, the Minister of Police has met with those business representatives and has heard their concerns, and a number of the initiatives we've taken on board has been a result of that continual feedback of how we can better provide support. Of course, none of that changes what has happened yesterday.
The opposition says you're soft on crime, are you?
Obviously, I've completely disagreed with that statement all the way through, and I just point to the record. We have not lessened any of the penalties that exist for what are these horrific acts. Burglary, 10 years, aggravated burglary, 14 years. None of that has changed. In fact, what we have done is increase our spending on police, increase the preventative support that's in place, but we know we also need to keep particularly when it's children.
Does this stabbing change anything in terms of policy?
We already had a heightened focus on these events. Just yesterday afternoon, I was meeting with the Justice Minister, Police Minister, Minister of Social Development, again working through where there may be gaps in the system, what more we can do. So this is where, as a government, we've had a focus, but it's also about continuing to bring people to justice. One of the reasons we've had a decline in ram raids this month will be because of the high number of prosecutions that the police has brought, but that doesn't change what this family has experienced in this case.
You just said that Hamilton was a great place to bring up a family.
It is.
Is it really? There are so many families growing up in emergency housing here.
This is a great city to bring up a family. That has caused extra growth. We need to make sure we're doing what we can to meet that growth. That includes the 150 million we've supported the council to make sure we've got the infrastructure so they can build more houses. In fact, since we've come into office, there's been a 30% increase in consents here, so they are building rapidly. At the same time, when we came into office, there were roughly 15 public houses being built a year. Now, since we've been in office, over 600. We are building rapidly, but there is extra demand in the city that we need to meet. Yeah.
Coming back to the Sandringham killing, did you shop at the dairy yourself? You live in the area?
No, my local dairy is a little closer to my home, but it is still, quite close to where I reside, and it's a close-knit community, so I am aware of the dairy. And I am aware of some of the community members who work closely to support that local shop owner.
One of those members is Sunny Kushal. He has called on the government to meet with his...
sorry, I was meaning the local Sandringham community.
Okay, well, local community members in terms of the dairy industry. One of those members is Sunny Kushal. Will you meet with him and his members too?
I believe it was maybe, I want to say 3 weeks ago, he met with the Minister of Police. And this is where, as I say, some of the concerns that are being raised, you will have seen that we have been working to respond to those preventative measures. Roughly 120 owners of at-risk properties or those who have already experienced crime have either had installations or have contractors in place to install, and that's alongside the roughly 1,000 fog cannons that we've installed for business owners since 2018.
Sunny says that you prioritise offenders over business owners. Do you think that's true under your government?
I know Sunny. I've known Sunny for a number of years through politics. I completely reject what he said.
You've talked about preventative measures, but what a lot of people are calling for are greater consequences, particularly for youth offenders. So why aren't you looking at that?
And you've heard me today talk about the fact that the penalties remain the same under this government as they have been previously.
I mean, you would like to see them increased.
Again, for burglary, 10 years. Aggravated burglary, 14 years. The penalties exist. Some of the preventative programs and interventions we've put in place are making a difference. And that is one of the reasons you are starting to see a decline in some areas, but we know we need to keep going.
Putting aside the boot camp policy, would you look at ankle bracelets?
Again, you've heard some of our views already. The reason we reject boot camps is because the evidence shows they don't work. What I would say is that there is the ability for young people, of course, already to go into the youth court, or if it's serious enough, to go into the district court. So they will use a range of different options available to them.
Would you expand beyond what's already being done with ankle bracelets? Would you expand that?
Again, those are tools that are already available to the courts when young people enter into them. What we're trying to expand is particularly the programs at the earlier ages, because we are seeing more 12 and 13-year-olds. That's new. And so that's where some of our interventions have been focused, because the youth court is in place to deal with those kids. That's where we are starting to see those programs make a difference.
Are you worried that dairy owners are going to start arming themselves?
That is an issue that has been raised with us, and of course our focus is their safety. And look, and this is a horrific event that has occurred in Sandringham, and I wouldn't want any of my statements here to connect to that, because actually that is an absolute tragedy that has occurred. Separately, we've been having conversations around how we make sure that we keep people safe. We've taken a different view from some of the dairy owners over the idea of whether or not arming keeps people safer.
Is the government failing to protect shop owners from this crime wave though?
Firstly, again, as I say, first and foremost for us, it's about just acknowledging the family members today, and of course the individual who committed this crime needs to be brought to justice and held responsibility for what has occurred here. We do, however, have a role to play in trying to prevent these things from occurring in the first place, and you've already heard me say that.
Can the government do more then?
I will always look for what more that we can do, always. One act is one too many. One robbery is one too many. So for us, it's not a matter of having some kind of tolerance for crime in our community. So we will keep looking for what more we can do. And again, these preventative measures we've recently put in place have been part of that.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. To stay up to date with all the latest news from the New Zealand Herald, click the subscribe button below or check out one of the videos here, and head over to nzherald.co.nz for more details on these stories and more.